Okay, good evening, everyone. And I'd like to ask everyone to please mute yourself. If you do want to ask a question, which of course we welcome that, please then unmute yourself so that we can have a meaningful discussion. And so you can hear what I'm saying and I can hear myself talk, which rabbi doesn't like to hear himself talk. So tonight's title is The Four Sons. Who are they? What makes them tick? And how to deal and teach our children and to talk to them on Pesach by the Seder night or any other time for that matter. What are their questions? Are we addressing their questions? Do we have the answers to their questions? And the truth of the matter is, when you think about Pesach and the Seder especially, it's about questions. It's about asking questions. And to the point where it's an actual mitzvah on Pesach to ask questions and to talk to your children and teach them in the form of question and answer. That is actually a mitzvah on Pesach. So questions become is paramount by the Seder. And to the point where we're told that if you don't have children at your Seder, which sadly this year, or whatever, maybe not sadly, it is what it is, this is what God wanted this year, that a lot of us are going to be, a lot of the Jewish people are going to be at their Seders without their children. And if they're sitting alone, we're supposed to ask the questions to other adults if there are no children. And if you're sitting alone, absolutely alone, there's no one else at your table, we're told that we should ask ourselves the question. And the question is why? Why would we ask ourselves questions? If we have something to say to ourselves, we want to relive, we want to recount the story of the Exodus, you're talking to yourself. What's the point in asking yourself a question and then giving yourself an answer? What's the point of this? Why is that? And I think the answer is because the question in itself, the very act that we ask questions, is an important thing. Why? Because slaves don't ask questions. Slaves don't ask because they're not allowed to challenge the status quo. In general, all abuse, when you talk about abuse happens in silence. A free person asks questions. A free person expresses himself. He's able to ask whether he gets the answer, he doesn't get the answer. That's the sign of freedom. The first sign of freedom is that you're able to ask. If you're not free, you can't ask. And that's why on Pesach, when we celebrate freedom, when the theme of the night is to be free, we are told, ask as many questions as you can. You'll get the answer. You don't get the answer. By the way, I'll ask you all watching now. When was the last time you asked the 4 questions and you got answers? We don't even answer those questions mostly. When you think about it, we don't even answer the questions. When was the last time you got an answer why you recline on Pesach and why you dip your vegetable in the salt water, which is one of the questions of the 4? You don't even get the answer. That's not the important thing over here. What's important is that we ask questions that we can express ourselves, and sometimes we will get the answer, sometimes we won't, but question is the order of the day. Free people ask questions. And on Pesach, as a parent, you are told you should tell your children to ask. You should encourage them to ask. It doesn't make a difference if you have the answer, if you don't have the answer, as I just mentioned. The question is what's important. And more in detail, there are 4 questions that come from 4 different sons. We talk about the 4 sons at the Seder. And I would like to now draw your attention to the source sheet if you printed it out. Let's read the first source sheet. It starts on page. It's the paragraph that begins with "Blessed is he." Blessed is the omnipresent. This is when we introduce the 4 sons at the Seder. We say, "Blessed is the omnipresent one. Blessed be he." Blessed is he who gave the Torah to his people Israel. Blessed be he. So we say twice, blessed be he, right? We begin with saying, Baruch HaMakim, blessed be the omnipresent one. And we say, blessed be he. And then again we say, blessed is he who gave the Torah to his people. Blessed be he. Why do we have to say twice, blessed be he? And then it goes on to say the Torah speaks of 4 children. One is wise, one is wicked, one is simple, and one does not know how to ask. And those are the 4 famous children, the 4 famous sons. We all know them. But the question over here is, I'll ask another question, since we're in the mode of asking questions. So the question now is, why does it say one is wise, one is wicked, one is simple? You just say the wise, the wicked, the simple one, and the one who doesn't know how to ask. Why say before each one, echad, one? We can count ourselves and know that there's 4 sons. What is this echad, chacham, one is wise, echad, rasha, one is wicked, echad, tam, one is simple, and echad, shay. What is the meaning of that? And it is a strange opening or introduction to the 4 sons. And then, of course, right after that, the Hagaddah goes on to describe the 4 sons. Now, what does it say over here? It is the Torah speaks of 4 children. Right? In that paragraph, the first paragraph, it says over here, the Torah speaks of 4 children. One is wise and so on. Question is, where does the Torah speak of 4 children? Did you ever think of that? Where in the Torah, in the Chumash, in the 5 books of Moses, is there a reference to these 4 children? It doesn't say in the Chumash anywhere. It doesn't say in the Torah anywhere that on Pesach there are going to be 4 children, you should address them. There's no mention of that in the Torah. Where did the rabbis come up with this idea that the Torah talks of 4 children? And the answer is that in the Torah we find 4 verses where Moses talks about a conversation between parents and children. And that's in your second sheet that I uploaded for you. And over here you could see there are 4 paragraphs from the actual Torah. 3 of these conversations between parents and children are mentioned. Moses mentions them right after they left Egypt in the book of Exodus. 3 of the verses are right when they leave Egypt, and the last one is 40 years later in the book of Deuteronomy. Now, for the first text, you could see them, right? Let's read them. In Exodus 12:25, it begins to read, and you have it right there in front of you. It will be that when you will come to the land that Hashem, Moses is saying this to the Jewish people. It will be that when you will come to the land that Hashem will give you, as he has spoken, you shall observe this service. He's talking about the Paschal offering. And it shall be that when your children will say to you, what is this service to you? You shall say, it is a Pesach feast offering to Hashem, who skipped over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians, but he saved our households. And the people bowed and prostrated themselves. When they heard this, they bowed and prostrated themselves. And Rashi tells us that why did they bow and prostrate themselves? So he gives 3 reasons. One, because Moses in this paragraph is telling them, he's generally telling them that they're going to be redeemed from Egypt. The second reason Rashi gives is that they're so happy and they're bowing in praise of Hashem and thanks for Hashem for the promise that they're going to be going to the land of Israel, which is right in this verse. And the third reason Rashi gives is because in this verse, Moshe promises them, informs them that they will have children. So for these 3 reasons, that people bowed and prostrated themselves, etc. So that's the first text of the Torah. It's in the book of Exodus, where Moshe tells them clear, your children will say to you, what is the service to you? And you should answer whatever the answer is. So there you have one text where there's a father talking to his child after the child asks him a question. The second text is right after that. You can see it. It's in Exodus 13:8, just a few verses after the first. And there too, we read in verse 8, it says, "And you shall tell your son on that day, saying, it is on account of this that Hashem did for me when I left Egypt." So here too, a father is talking to his son. The third text is in Exodus 13:14, and we'll read it together. "And it shall be, when your son will ask you tomorrow, what is this? You shall say to him, with a strong hand Hashem removed us from Egypt, from the house of bondage." So here we see a third case in the Torah itself, where Moshe is referring to a conversation between parents and children, between father and son. And then the fourth one is in Deuteronomy. Verse 26, chapter 6, verse 20, over there it reads, "When your son will ask you tomorrow, saying, what are the testimonies and the statutes and the ordinances that Hashem, our God, commanded you?" And you should go on to tell your son whatever the answer is. So here again, we have a fourth verse where Moshe tells the Jewish, the people, that there's going to be a conversation between parents and children, and what you should tell them when you have that conversation. So it's from these four verses, which really are the same idea when you think about it. It's basically children asking their parents, and their parents answering them what this service is, why we're doing this, why that we were taken out of Egypt, and so on. But our rabbis explain that these are actually not four similar verses, and it's not the same idea. The rabbis tell us that the four verses, these four examples of parents talking to children, are not the same child. Each one is referring to a different type of child, because otherwise it's redundant. You don't need Moshe to tell you four times the same thing. If someone will ask you, obviously he's talking about four different cases, four different children, four different cases, four different situations. So that's the answer from the Torah we have. That's why it says the Torah speaks of four children, because Moses is referring to four different children. The question remains, how did the rabbis match up these four verses to the specific four children, which are the wise one, the wicked one, the simple one, and the one who doesn't know how to ask? How did they know that verse 1 is referring to this child, verse 2 is the simple one, or the wicked one, whichever one they matched? How did they know to match exactly which verse to which son? The Torah doesn't say in the verse, when your smart child will ask you, or in another verse, when your wicked child, your sin rebellious child will ask you. It just says when your child will ask. So how do they know which one is the question of the wise one, and which question is the question of the simple one? So let me point out, first of all, question. Do you have any questions up till now? You good? Do that. Okay. We'll move on. So how did the rabbis match them up? Let me tell you, I'll first tell you which verse refers to which child, and then I'll tell you how they matched them up. How did they know which verse is referring to which child? Okay. So the fourth one, the fourth text, which is in Deuteronomy, our sages tell us that where it says there in verse 20, when your son will ask you tomorrow, saying, what are the testimonies and the statutes and the ordinances? That is the question of the wise son. Now go back to the first question, to the first page. Look at the one the wise one says on text 2, on the second page. The wise one, what does he say? What are the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws which God, our God, had commanded you? That's right out of Deuteronomy 6:20. You see that? Great. So the rabbis tell that verse is the son, that's the wise one. Soon we'll see how they deduced that this is the wise one. Now, the first text, Exodus 12:25 through 27, our rabbis tell us this is the question of the rebellious, sinful, wicked child. It will be that when Hashem, I'm going to read it to you again. It will be that when you will come to the land that Hashem will give you, as he has spoken, you shall observe the service And it shall be that when your children will say to you, what is this service to you? In Hebrew, ma ha'avoda hazos lachem. Look at the second page with the Russia. Text 3 on the second page. The wicked one. What does he say? What is this service to you? That's right out of Exodus 12:25 or 26. So that's the Russia, the wicked one. The third one, the third verse, Exodus 13:14, is the simpleton. And I'll read it again. And it shall be when your son will ask you tomorrow, what is this? You shall say to him, with a strong hand Hashem removed us from Egypt, from the house of bondage. Take a look at the other page under the simpleton. The simpleton, what does he say? What is this? Straight out of Exodus 13:14. Actually, the entire text is recorded in the Hagaddah as the statement of the simpleton. And the one who does not ask, that is the second one. Exodus 13:8. It says, and you shall tell your son on that day, saying, it is on account of this that Hashem did me fit for me when I left Egypt. When you look into Hagaddah, in text 5 on the second page, over there it says, as for the one who does not ask, you must say, initiate him. As it is said, you shall tell your child at that day, it is because of this that God. So it's right out of Exodus 13:14. So there we have the four sons are matched up with these four verses. The question is, how did the rabbis know to say that Exodus 12:25 is the wicked son, Exodus 13:8 is the one that does not ask, Exodus 13:14 is the simple one, and Deuteronomy 6:20 is the wise one. So here it is. The one who does not ask is quite simple. When you take a look at the different texts, in 3 of them it says, if your son will ask you or say to you. It's in Exodus 13:8. It's the only one of the 4 where it doesn't say, and it will be when your son asks you. It just says straight out, and you shall tell your son on that day. He's not asking you. Moshe is telling the father, tell him before he even asks, because obviously we're talking about this is the one that doesn't ask. He doesn't know how to ask. But the other 3, how did we know? So that one we understand. That's the one that doesn't know how to ask. But what about the other 3? How do we know that the first one from Exodus 12:25 is the wicked, and Deuteronomy is the son, the wise one? So let me share with you the how we know this. When you take a look, the rabbis were very, very sensitive to the nuances in the Torah, as we all know. The rabbis deduced there were 3 things in that verse in Exodus 12, the first one, how they knew that this is the wicked son. Please mute yourself, please. There were 3 ways how they knew that this is the wicked son. How did they know it? Well, I'll tell you what the 3 ways are. Number 1, it says over here, and it shall be in verse 26 over there in the first text. Go to verse 26, and it shall, the 4th line, and it shall be. It says over there, and it shall be that when your children will say to you, it doesn't say when your children will ask you. He's not asking, he's saying, he's making statements. That was the first way, and I'll explain in a minute. The other thing is, in all the other 3 verses, Moshe is talking to one father addressing one son. Up here in Exodus 12:25-27, the first one, it's all in the plural. Again, verse 26, and it shall be that when your children, not when your child, will say to you, what is this service to you? We're taught there's a bunch of children here together. This is not one child. And it's from the plural that they knew that this is the wicked. I'll explain in a minute. And the third thing they knew is from the word. In all the other three, it says, look at Exodus 13:8 in the second one. And you shall tell you, I'm asking everyone to please mute themselves because there's noise coming from there. Take a look at text, the second one from Exodus 13:8. And you shall tell your son on that day, saying, the word saying. In all the bottom three, it says the word saying. Again, in Exodus 13:14, and it shall be when your son will ask you tomorrow. In the translation, it's missing, but in the Hebrew, it says lamor, saying. And the same thing in Deuteronomy. When your son will ask you tomorrow, saying. In each of the three, it says lamor, saying. By the first one, it doesn't say that word. Let me explain these three nuances. A smart child, even a simple child, he asks. He's interested to know. There's something bothering him. There's something that he wants to know, and he comes and asks. And he wants an answer. The first one, the one that says, he doesn't ask. Moshe says, it'll be when your son will say to you. With these rebellious children, they don't ask, they make statements. They're not asking questions. They're challenging you. They're saying, what is this? They're mocking you. They're cynical. They're not asking anything because they don't want any answer. There was a smart person once said, someone came to him, a rebellious person once came to him and asked him a bunch of questions. So he said, I can answer a question. He says, I cannot answer an answer. A lot of people, rebellious, their wicked son, the rebellious son, when he's asking his question, he's not asking anything. He's actually, he's giving you his excuses. He's using his question as an excuse why he doesn't want to do what Hashem wants. It's an excuse. It's not a question. He's saying, why do we do this? He's not looking for an answer. To him, that was his own excuse for not doing what he's supposed to do. And because it's from that the rabbis knew, he's not asking, he's saying. They knew right away, this is the wicked son. The same thing with the plural and the singular. A question that comes from a singular person is because it's an inquiry that the individual is bothered by. He wants to know. He's seeking. He's a seeker. He's a spiritual seeker. He's an intellectual seeker. Whatever the question is, it's something inside of him that wants to know. Individual. By the first one, the wicked comes with a group of people. It's a group of people who are mocking. Usually scoffers and mockers do it in groups. They challenge in groups. And that's another way the rabbis knew that first verse is talking about the wicked son. And the same thing with the last one, which is where it says lamor, to say. When you ask a question by all three, it says that you should tell you that he asks the son will ask you to say. In other words, he wants you to say something back to him. He's looking for an answer. By the first one, it doesn't say he will say to you, he'll ask you to say. He's not looking for anything back because he's not looking for answers. He's looking to mock, to challenge, to make fun, to do whatever he does in the most cynical, scoffing way. And that's how the rabbis knew that the first one is the wicked son. But here's an interesting question. When you look at the answer that the Hagaddah gives to the wicked son, it's very different than the answer that is in the verse that is addressing the wicked son. Take a look at Exodus 12:25 again. I'm going to read verse 26 and 27, the question and the answer. And it shall be that when your children will say to you, and again, we're talking about the wicked son over here, will say to you, what is the service to you? You shall say, as an answer, it is a Pesach feast offering to Hashem, who skipped over our houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when he smote the Egyptians, but he saved our household. Take a look at the answer to the wicked son in the Hagaddah. It's a totally different answer. The wicked one, what does he say? What is this service to you? That's text 3 on the second page. He says to you, but not to him. By thus excluding himself from the community, he has denied that which is fundamental. You therefore blunt his teeth and say to him, it is because of this that God acted for me when I left Egypt. For me, but not for him. If he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. There's no resemblance in this answer to the one in the verse. Why are we giving a totally different answer? And while I'm talking about the answers in the Haggadah, when you take a look and you analyze all the different answers to the 4 sons, they're a little strange. What does the wise one ask? Let's look at the wise one. The wise one, what does he say? What are the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws which God, our God, has commanded you? He's asking you a good question, right? What is your answer to him? You in turn shall instruct them on the laws of Pesach, up to one is not to eat any dessert after the Pesach lamb, the Afikoman. Why? That's an answer to his question. The answer is bizarre. The same thing with the simple one. Go to 4. The simpleton, what does he say? What is this? Thus you shall say to him, God took us out of Egypt from the house of slaves with a strong hand. Is that the answer to his question? It's a little strange here. And the one that doesn't know how to ask, what do you say? He doesn't ask, but you initiate. You have to tell him. You should tell him that it is because of this that God acted me when I left Egypt. These are strange statements to tell these kids. It's not an answer to the question they're asking. Also, what are we telling the wicked son? We say that you deny that which is fundamental. Where did the wicked son deny that which is fundamental? He asked a basic question. What are you guys doing here? He denied that which is fundamental. And what does this mean, blunt out his teeth? What kind of thing is that? Which educator blunts out the teeth of his wicked son? What does that even mean? And then another interesting nuance. That the son is asking in the first person, what is this service to you? He's addressing his father and mother. Answer at the end. What do we answer him? What could we say to him at the end? And you too, blunt out his teeth and say to him, it is because of this that God acted for me when I left Egypt, for me but not for him. Why doesn't it say, for me but not for you, in the first person? Why suddenly are we talking about in third person? It should have said, this is a boy that's right at the Seder table. He said to us, to the father and mother, what is this service to you? He didn't say, what is this service to them? He said, what is this service to you? Why are we saying to him in the third person? If he would have been there, he would not have been redeemed. It should have said, if you would have been there, you would not have been redeemed. So that's another interesting question, which we'll answer in the process. And then go back to the top paragraph of that page. Blessed is the omnipresent one. I asked this before already. Why do we say twice, blessed be he, blessed is he, be he? It sounds redundant. And what is the connection between that introduction to the 4 sons? Let's read that paragraph again together. Blessed is the omnipresent one. Blessed be he. Blessed is he who gave the Torah to the people Israel. Blessed is be he. The Torah speaks of 4 children, one is white. What is the introduction of blessed is the omnipresent, blessed was that gave the Torah to these 4 sons? It's a funny introduction. Seems a little out of place. And then again, why 1, 4 times the word echad, one? One is wise, one is wicked, one is simple, and so on. Why not just say the simple one, the wise one, the wicked one, the simple, and the one who does not ask? You have to count them, each one. We know how to count. We don't need Hagaddah to count it for us. So let me begin now to take you on a journey and to see how the Hagaddah and the rabbis who formulated the text of the Hagaddah were absolutely brilliant. and what kind of fundamental pedagogic messages and instructions we have over here and how to educate and speak to our children. Because this is going to be fascinating. I want to point out again on the first paragraph, blessed is the omnipresent one, right? It says over here, the Torah on the third line, the Torah speaks of 4 children. Those 5 words itself, those 6 words. In those 6 words alone lie message upon message upon message on how to treat and see your children. Let me point out some of them. First of all, the Torah recognizes there are 4 children. There's no one child, one program fits all. Every child is different. The Torah is not a cookie cutter program that fits all your children. As we many times think that our children have to fit the mold that we have put them in and that we want to fit them into. The Torah, first of all, says, Dalid Bon, there are 4 children. It's not one for all. And you have to find, as a parent, as an educator, you have to find in the Torah the message, the teaching that will talk to your children and to your child individual. You have to find the words in the Torah that speaks and resonates with your individual child. That's number 1. Number 2 we have in this. 4 sons. The Torah calls them your sons, no matter who they are. They could be the wise one, they could be the wicked one, the sinful one, or the rebellious one, however you want to call them. They're opposites from one end to one extreme to the other. They are all 4 your sons. You have to see them as your children. You can never say this one, he's out. They are all yours. And the next thing, Dibra Torah, the Torah speaks of 4 children. That means that there's a message in Torah for every type of child. The Torah doesn't just talk to the spiritualist. The Torah doesn't just talk to to the uninitiated. The Torah is there, and in it you can find, as I mentioned before, messages for every one of your children. And if you don't, you have not understood, you're not reading the Torah properly. It's God forbid to say that this and this particular child is outside of the Torah's realm. The Torah has nothing to say. He's too rebellious. He's too far gone. He's too messed up. God forbid if a father or mother say such a thing about their child. The 4 children may be asking the same, what seems like the same question, but you have to give each one a different answer. You know what they say? They say that you have to answer. You don't have to answer questions. A real educator doesn't answer questions. He answers the person. When your child is asking you, Daddy, Mom, he has a question that he's coming to you with. You can simply answer the question and get him off your back. Give him the text-based answer, but then you failed as an educator. You have to answer the child. You don't answer questions. You answer people. You have to know where that question is coming from. What's bothering him that brought about that question? And only then could you really answer and satisfy that child's need. Don't answer text questions, the text-based answers. The child's not looking for that. That's not what's bothering him. You have to talk to your child. Find out where that question came from. And therefore, even though the 4 sons, they're basically asking the same question. But if you don't have the sensitivity to find out what is prompting that question, what is motivating that question, you're not acting like a father, you're not acting like a mother, you're not acting like an educator. And that's what the Torah is saying over here. The Torah speaks to 4 children. You have to find it in the Torah's words, the right answer to each one of these children individually. And I want you to know that these 4 children are in every classroom, they're in every community, they're in every family. They're around every single Seder table. And I would go one step further in saying they're not only around your Seder table with other people, they're not 4 different people. Within each one of us, there are the 4 children. We are sometimes wise, sometimes we're the wicked one, sometimes we're the simple one, and sometimes we're the one that doesn't even know how to ask. And I'll explain each one now individually. And at the Seder table, you have to address each one of these children and each child within yourself. You have to address yourself, that wicked part within you, that wise spiritual part within you, that simple part within you, and that uninitiated part within you. Your mother will tell you what's the wise part within you. Your mother-in-law will tell you which is the wicked side within you, and so on and so forth. Okay. Let's go start with the wise one. And I'll try to do this a little quicker because we have about 23 minutes left. The wise one, what does he say? Let's read that together. When we say the wise one, we're not just talking about a person who has an IQ, a high IQ. The Hagaddah is talking about over here a spiritual child, a person who has got the real chokhmah, the chokhmah of Torah within him. He has the wisdom of Torah. He has humility. He's a spiritualist. He's climbing high. He's looking for his transcendence. He's looking for something more to life than just the here and now. He's looking for something deep. So what does he ask? Let's see what his question is. What are the testimonies, the statutes, and these laws which our God has commanded you? When you think about it, I just want to point out something interesting before I talk about the wise son. When you realize, what did we want? What was the problem we had with the wicked son? He says to you, right? Let's read the wicked one for a second. I'm going back and forth, but you'll forgive me. The wicked one, what does he say? What is the service to you? He says to you, but not to him. And we're all up in arms about that, right? We're so upset that he excluded himself, right? It's to you, not to him. Let's go back to the wise one. What does he say? He's saying basically the same thing. What are the testimonies, the statutes, and the laws which God, your God, our God, has commanded you? He also says you. Why over here don't we say, hey, you're a wicked son? You said you, but not to him. So here's the answer. What's bothering the wise son is as follows. He's asking a very idealistic question. He's saying, why do you, my elders, my parents, my grandparents, my teachers, why are you making distinctions within Torah and mitzvahs? You have testimonies, statutes, the laws. You know what those 3 are? We know that in the Torah there are different types of laws, right? There is what we call the chukim or the mishpatim. Those are the laws that are rational. Don't steal, don't lie. If you borrow money, you have to pay it back. Don't commit murder, and so on and so forth. These are rational laws that every human being can understand. Then we have the testimonials, which are the Shabbos, the holidays. These represent ideas, represent our connection to God. They also make sense at some level. They represent ideas. Let's say we would not have we wouldn't have done them on our own had the God not told us to do it. But once God told us to do it, we understand what they are all about. And then there are the chukim, the statutes. Those statutes are the ones that we don't know why. They make no sense. Don't eat milk together with meat. Don't wear a garment of wool and linen together. We don't know why those are. Those are super rational mitzvahs. We have no idea what they are, why they are. There's no sense to them, at least on our level. So the wise son, the spiritual son, is saying to us, why, my elders, are you making distinctions in the mitzvahs? Why are you separating this makes sense, this doesn't, and so on? He says, what difference does it make? If it makes sense, it doesn't make sense. Why are you making any distinctions? If you're in a relationship with God, then it's about God. It's not about us. We do understand. We don't understand. These we do understand. Those we don't understand. What difference does it make? Why are we even making any distinction? As the great sages say, had we been, what did Kennedy say? Don't ask not what you can do for what God can do for you, what the country can do for you. Ask what you can do for the country. The Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, said it in different words. Ask not what you could, what God can do for you. Ask what you can do for God. This is not about us. This is about God. So He gives you a mitzvah that doesn't make sense. What difference does it make? When you're in a good relation with your spouse, you need to understand everything that they want. You don't. Why are we trying, when you start making distinctions, this does make sense, this mitzvah does, you're trying to insert your own emotions, your own subjective self into the process. This does make sense in my mind, that doesn't make sense. Why are you bringing yourself into it? This is about God, not about you. And that's his question, and it's a powerful, meaningful, important question. What's the answer? What do we answer him? Look in the words, and that's in text 2, the wise one. You in turn shall instruct him in the laws of Pesach. What God is telling the father, the educator, to tell this spiritual child is as follows. What does Pesach mean? Pesach means to pass over, to transcend, right? It's transcendence. You're going out of yourself. What happened on Passover? Passover, the angel passed over us. It's a leap. It's a jump. This spiritual child is trying to leap beyond himself. He's saying, I want a connection with God. I want to be spiritual. I want to and therefore it's not about me, it's about God. What difference does it make? The distinctions are not, he doesn't understand the distinctions. God says, when you're learning the laws of Pesach, in other words, when you're looking for transcendence, for a leap, for a jump, for a Passover, you're trying to go beyond, it has to have structure. Teach him the laws of that transcendence. Even in transcendence, there has to be structure. There are people that they are highly spiritual people. And they try to transcend, not to feel themselves, to feel completely out of themselves, spiritual, right? But you know what happens when they suddenly come back down and start feeling themselves? They become very vicious. They don't know how to integrate that spiritual feeling that they just had, that transcendent feeling with their life here on earth. They can't integrate both. They start becoming judgmental. They look down at other people who are not looking for a spiritual high, and so on and so forth. So the Torah tells the wicked son, the father tells this son as an answer, you have to teach him that even when you're in a Pesach mode, you're transcending, you're passing over, you're leaping. There's got to be structure. There has to be laws. It's not just you go out of yourself and there's no, and you're detached. No, there has to be structure to your transcendence. And then it goes even one step further. And it's up to the last law. What's the last law? That you're not to eat the dessert, anything after the afikomen. You shouldn't eat anything after the afikomen. That's the law there, because the last thing we eat at the Seder is the afikomen. Why do we mention this law to the wise son? What kind of answer is this to his question? He's asking, where's the distinction? You're telling him you're not allowed to eat after the afikomen. What's the connection? But there's a profound connection. What is the afikomen? What do we eat what do we eat as the afikomen? Today, what do we eat in the afikomen? We eat matzah, right? Why are we not allowed to eat anything after the afikomen, after the matzah? Because God wanted that we should have the taste of the matzah in our mouth. If you eat something else, then the taste goes away, and you're not having to, you drink. If you ate something else, like for example, if you after the afikomen, you ate applesauce. So you'll have the taste of the applesauce in your mouth when you went to sleep. Not the matzah. God didn't want that. He wanted the taste of the matzah. What's the meaning of this? There's profound meaning here. What God wants you should taste the matzah. What does matzah represent? Matzah is called the food of faith. Why do we eat matzah on Passover? Because we left Egypt in haste and we went out into the desert. We followed Moses blindly into the desert. We trusted him without taking any provisions. So it's the food of faith, it was our testimony to our great faith. What is faith? Faith is that was the transcendent, right? It wasn't a rational thing that we did. We went on faith. God says he wants us to taste that faith. He wants the taste of the matzah to be left in our mouth. In other words, that even our transcendence should taste good to us. We should there should be some sense to us. We should integrate it into our own emotions, our own feelings, our own taste. He doesn't want us to be detached from our transcendence. He wants it to speak on all levels of our existence, our rational mind, our feelings, our taste. It should be joyous to us, even our transcendence. So that's the answer to this kid. He's asking why the distinctions. There's a very important reason for these distinctions. Because God wants structure in our transcendence. He wants structure in our faith. He wants structure in our spiritual seeking. Because if not, there's a part of us that's detached. We're working on a soul level only, and if it doesn't translate and make sense and sit well with our minds and hearts, there's a part of us that's detached. God wants that the child, that spiritual child, should know that when he's climbing high, he should know that that has to make sense in his mouth, in his taste, in his emotions, in his joy, in his mind, in his rational mind, at every level, wherever possible. Any questions? In other words, you have to be a human being when you're spiritual. You have to be a mensch. What does a mensch mean? Someone that understands, someone that has feelings, is compassionate, sees another person, even in this transcendence. That's the message. That's the answer to the Chacham. It's a brilliant answer. Let's move on to the wicked one. What's the wicked one? He's the rebellious child. What does he say? He's saying a very important question. He's not an idiot. This is not the question of a fool. This is the question of a very, very smart kid. Sometimes the wicked one is even smarter than the spiritual one. He says, what is this service to you? He's looking at the whole Seder, and he doesn't understand what's going on. He says to his father and mother, this is freedom? You realize, let's describe Pesach. I'm going to say it in the words of the wicked son. For the last 3 weeks, he saw his mother labor away in cleaning the house and going crazy to get rid of every vestige of chametz in the house, leavened crumbs. And the night before the Seder, he saw his father going around with a candle and looking for chametz and crawling under the bed to find a speck of dust of chametz. And then in the morning, he burnt it. He was not there. And he says he comes into he says that's freedom, to work like a dog to reach Pesach. And then when you analyze the holiday itself, there is no holiday like Pesach that's so full of all the different laws, the nuances, the minutiae. There's law upon law upon law. There's books and books on laws of Pesach. So the kid is saying, that's freedom? He's saying, wow, avodah, what is this labor? What is this? Avodah means labor. We're laboring in this whole thing. This is one big labor for us. He says, God took us out of bondage. He took us out of one bondage and put us into another bondage. He said, that's freedom? Every detail of our life is now governed by God, by this new, by the giving of the Torah. We went from one bondage to another. We didn't become free. To him, freedom is you can do. I want to be a couch potato. I'll be a couch potato. I want to go on vacation. I'll go on vacation. I want to go to any restaurant I want. I want to do whatever I want. That's freedom to him. So he asked, this is freedom? That's what he's asking. What is this service to you? I want you to know that there were a number of generations, complete generations of Jews that asked this question. And they chose for themselves a different lifestyle. They said they had enough of this. They didn't understand how this represents a free people. What happens next in the Hagaddah? Let's read a little further. Because of this, by thus excluding himself from the community, what does the Hagaddah mean over here? This is a child that feels excluded. He looks at the community, he looks at what's going on at the table at the Seder. He says, I don't feel part of this. This makes no sense to me. And what do we respond to such children sometimes when they come with these questions, these challenges? We call them, what do we say to them? Oh, look at he's rebellious. He what's the words over here? He is denied that which is fundamental. We start discounting him. He denies the whole Torah. We call him a kafir. What does a kafar be'ikar mean? He's a napikaris. He's a heretic. We start calling him all kinds of names. He's not a heretic. He doesn't feel part of the community. That's what happens. And we sometimes help him feel that way. The minute they start asking questions, we say, oh, look at him. He's asking too many questions. So you have to blunt out his teeth. Listen to these words. This is beautiful. This is so sweet. What does it mean? So we say that the child he doesn't feel part of the community. He doesn't feel an identity in Judaism. It's all foreign to him. You know what happens to a child that doesn't feel an identity in Judaism? He's going to look for his identity somewhere else. Make no mistake about it. If he doesn't find an identity around your table, in your bosom, he's going to find his identity somewhere else. Another religion, whether it's drugs, who knows what. So what do you have to do? It says there, blunt out his teeth. What does blunt out his teeth mean? We're violent here? We're going to be violent, punch out his teeth? The word blunt out his teeth means something very different. What we're telling the father and the mother who's listening to this rebellious child, and they're crying, they're coming to this rabbi and saying, my child became rebellious. What is teeth? I want you to listen carefully. What is teeth? Teeth are sharp. What this child is coming with, he's got a sharp tongue. He's got sharp teeth. He's cynical. He's biting into us, into our tradition. He's making fun of it, right? His bite is very difficult. He's laughing, right? He's giving you a lot of tzoras, a lot of agony. What the Hagaddah is telling you, what the sages are telling him, ignore his teeth. Go beyond his teeth. Go beyond the cynicism. This kid is being cynical, but that's not really what he's trying. He's searching. He's crying out for love. He's crying out for meaning. He's crying out for connection. This is a thirsty soul who's looking. He's just expressing it in this rebellious way. But behind the teeth, behind that cynicism, behind that sharpness, there's a neshama. He's crying. He's looking for validation. You know how many parents told me when their child became who knows what, he went off the way and he lost his way, and they would tell me, I've heard this from many parents that went through this. This child, when he was a little kid, he was a sweetheart. He was the best one of my children. He was the most sensitive. And that's true. It's true. When you go beyond his teeth, beyond that cynicism, beyond that question, beyond that sharpness, what are you going to find? Beauty. A soul, a soft soul. I want to point out something very interesting. In the Hebrew word, the wicked is Russia, right? What's the Russia? Russia in the numerical value equals 570. Trust me on this one. Okay, each letter has a numerical value. Russia's 570. Write that down. What's a tzaddik? A righteous child. A tzaddik equals numerically 204. Okay? What is shinov? Teeth, right? We're trying to blunt out his teeth. How much does the word shinov add up to? 366. Says one of the great sages, take the Russia minus his teeth, the 570 minus 366, what do you get? 204, the tzaddik. Take out his teeth, blunt out his teeth, and what are you going to be left with? A tzaddikul, a righteous, sweet little child. Remove the teeth, the cynicism from the Russia, from the 570, you end up with 204, which is the tzaddik. And guess what? No one is born with teeth. You know that? No human being is born with teeth. His cynicism, his negativity, his sharp tongue, that came later. That's not his natural self. He wasn't born that way. That came later. What's the answer to this child? What we have to answer this child is as follows. There's another message over here in blunting out his teeth. What is this child saying? This is freedom. Freedom is to do what you want, right? Live and let live. Be what you want, right? Expression, free expression. But we tell the child, if you really believe that, then you should blunt out your teeth. Why? Because when did you get your teeth? Your teeth grew with you. You weren't born with them. That came later. That means a human being, other animals, some of them are born with teeth. They're right away. They're developed the minute they're born. Within a few minutes, a few hours, they're developed fully. They're on their own, right? Animals, very quickly, they're on their own. Children are not. Human beings are not. Human beings, it's an effort. You have to work to develop yourself. It's a work in progress. It happens slowly, little by little, with hard work. That's the answer to this rebellious child. You know what it says in the beginning of Genesis? God says, with regard to every creation, Hashem said, He created the water, He created the heavens, He created trees. God did that all by Himself. When it comes to the creation of the human being, God says suddenly in the plural, He says, let's make a human being. Who's He talking to? Let's make a human being. There are many answers. But one answer I heard was, He's talking to the mother and father. Over here, we're going to do this as a partnership. We're going to create a human being together. I'm going to give him the soul, you're going to give him the body, and together we're going to raise this child. We'll mold him into something. And that's what we have to tell the child, this rebellious child. When do you become really free as a human being? Full self-expression is through development, through work. Just like your teeth came over time. It didn't happen. It was pain to grow your teeth, hurt. I remember the days when I had to give you that, what did they call it, those things you put for a child to make it a little easier for him. I forget the word. My youngest is 9, so you forgive me.
Pacifier?
No, not a pacifier. There's something. A teething ring, right? Something, a teething something. You want real self-expression. You want to reach perfection as a human being. It's hard work. They tell the story. Imagine a fish would say, I don't want to be in the water all the time. I want to go onto dry land. Feel free, right? I hate this water. A fish does that. He's dead. Tell the story of a bird. The bird came to God and said, God, you got to help me. He says, all the predators, they want to kill me. So God says, don't worry. I'll give you a beak. You'll be able to protect yourself. He says, a beak? That's ugly. So God says, I'll give you claws. He says, claws? That's not going to help me. They'll attack me. That's not going to get me far. So God says, you know what? Let me give you 2 wings. He dressed on him 2, what we call wings. And the bird looked up to God and said, what'd you do? You made me even heavier. Now when they come, I have more meat to carry when I run away from them. God says to him, that's not extra meat. That's going to give you the ability to soar on high, to become the bird that you have to be. It's the same thing with us. How do you want to become a human being fully developed, a real human being who's truly free to feel full self-expression? That will come through work. And that's what the Torah is. The Torah is not here to limit us. The Torah is telling us exactly how you can find your perfect way to live and be a healthy human being on every level, soul, body, so psychologically, on every level. It's like, the strings of a violin. Imagine someone said, these are too tight, these strings. Let's loosen them up a little bit. Let's loosen them up a little bit. What are you going to get? You're not going to get any music. When it's tight, the tighter it is, the better the music comes out. Yes, these restrictions, they're not restrictions. They're laser beams of energy, of spiritual energy that every mitzvah brings about. That's what gives us the ability to live. And that's why we say to him in third person. You remember the question? Why do we say to him at the end of that statement? We say, if he had been there, he would not have been redeemed. First of all, what kind of statement is that to your son? You tell your son, if you would have been in Egypt, you wouldn't have been redeemed? But that's not what we're telling him. We're not saying if you would have been there, you wouldn't be redeemed. We say if he would be there. In other words, if in Egypt there would be such a child that would be this rebellious, he wouldn't have been redeemed. But you, my little sonny boy, even with your wickedness, You stood at Mount Sinai. Every single Jewish soul was at Mount Sinai, and God chose us to be His nation forever and ever. And therefore, and this is the most positive message you can tell your son. Had this type of child been in Egypt, then with his attitude, he wouldn't have been redeemed. But once we went to Mount Sinai and received the Torah and became the Jewish people, and God chose every single one of us individually as His treasured nation forever and ever, we can never lose it anymore. We're forever in. That's what we're telling this child. It's the most positive message. If you remember, I told you when Moses tells the Jewish people that when the child will ask them and say to them, and they should answer them, they all bowed, right? They bowed in thanksgiving. Why did they bow? So Rashi says because they were so happy that they were given the promise for children. But when you think about it, we're not talking about individual people. When you tell them you're going to have children, it's a wonderful promise. But when you talk to a nation of 2.5 million people, you say you're going to have children. Of course, every nation has children. Why are they suddenly so overtaken with so much gratitude that they bow and they fall to the ground? But it's much more than that, because what Moshe was telling them and what made them so happy was the message. Because we remember what this text is talking about, the wicked son. What Moshe was telling them was that this wicked son will always be a child of the Jewish people. That's what Rashi means. Why were they so happy and they bowed? Because they were told that even the Rasha, even the wicked son, has a soul that can never be contaminated, that can never be corrupt. That's what made them bow. In other words, we're embracing this young child, and we're explaining to him that life is work. Just like teeth don't happen overnight. Your existence doesn't happen overnight. It's not a free-for-all. On the contrary, the more you develop, the more you discipline yourself, the more human being you are, the more on target you are. That's real freedom. And then we end it off by saying, with all your wickedness, you will be redeemed no matter what. He, the third person, this attitude in Egypt would have been stuck in Egypt, but not you. It is 9:05. So what I'm going to do is, we're going to stop over here, and the next two sons we will discuss on Thursday night at the same time to continue this class. I was hoping I'd be able to finish all the four sons in this class, but I'll finish them on Friday because it's already 9:05. Not too late for me, but I don't know if anyone is in the mood of continuing. So we'll continue next time. And there's a lot to say about the next two sons. There's tremendous beauty here. There's a lot to talk about. And I encourage all of you to come back Thursday for more. And if we finish it halfway through the class, I'll talk about the topic that I had prepared for Thursday night. Anyway. Okay, any questions, my dear friends?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Any questions?
I like the analogy with the gematria and the Russia and the teeth and the tzaddik. Maybe you could write something in the newsletter so that I could actually read it again and understand it better.
Maybe. Okay. I told you to write it down. You see, that's why I told you, write this down. You didn't listen.
How much time do I have? I wrote gematria.
I'm kidding. I'm joking.
Like 70,
Russia,
yeah.
Write it now.
Yeah,
Russia's 570.
I have the numbers. Okay. The meat.
Okay.
I think it was recorded, so you can go back.
Yes, it was recorded.
And look at it.
Yeah, I think it's recorded.
Okay.
Yeah. Very good. Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening, and I hope I enhanced your Seder a little bit, and you'll have what to say over to yourself or to your children, and come back for more on Thursday night. Thanks for watching.
Lovely.
And all of you on Facebook,
thank you.
It was nice teaching, and all of you be well, and we'll see you.
Thank you. No worries.